Look, I'm just a geologist. I like rocks. I love rocks.
All right, everybody. Hello and welcome to the Geology Flannelcast. My name is Steve.
Hey there, everybody. This is Chris.
Hello, this is Jesse.
Excellente there, Thornburg. Tonight on the Geology Flannelcast, we have an extra special, no, not really extra special, but we are talking about BIFs.
What does BIF stand for, Steve?
BIF stands for Biff Tannen from the 1985 classic, Back to the Future. Say hello to your mom for me. No, BIFs.
That's the first line that's on the outline. And I know he got so excited to say that. He's just been waiting all day just to say that.
No, BIFs stand for Banded Iron Formations. And you may say, like, okay, it's an iron formation. Why does it get a special name? Well, it's pretty predominant across the entire planet. That's why it gets its special name.
Hey,
so
I actually, okay. I want to start off with this quote. There's a,
I'm excited.
Yes.
This was previewed before we started recording.
It's not say hello to your mom for me, because that's the only quote I had.
It's a little more elegant than that. All right.
Got it.
So I use this reference book a lot. It's called An Oasis in Space, Earth History from the Beginning. And it's got a lot of great information in it. It's by a gentleman by the name of Preston Cloud. All right. So he starts off the section on banded iron formations. I'm just going to quote the textbook for this, I think it's just one sentence. All right, here we go. The bell of the crypto. Let me do that one more time. I just thought in my head, like, don't screw it up when you're reading. All right, here we go. The bell of the Cryptozoic rocks, beautiful much of the time and interesting all of the time, goes by the name of Banded Iron Formation, BIF for short. That's it.
That's I like the bell. I like that.
The bell of the Cryptozoic rocks, beautiful much of the time, interesting all of the time.
I'm going to start referring to rocks that I'm confused by as crypto. What's that? Cryptozoic?
Cryptozoic.
Yeah.
Cryptozoic. There you go.
I don't know what's up with this rock. It's cryptozoic.
Like it.
But it's interesting all of the time.
Interesting all the time.
So according to Encyclopedia Britannica, they're chemically precipitated rocks. So sometimes when you think of sedimentary rocks, you might not think of them as chemically precipitated, or at least I don't. When I think of sedimentary rocks, I think of like sand settling down or clay settling down or silt settling down. But these are actually,
well, if you want to go with the clastic rocks.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. I'm saying when I think said rock, I think classic said rock, not classic rock like Led Zeppelin or something. But so these are thin bedded or laminated, consisting of at least 15% iron.
More than that too.
At least 15%. Yeah.
Like 30 or so.
And it's usually layers of iron rich sediment, chert, chalcedony, jasper, quartz. And what's interesting is they're formed on all continental rocks. You can basically find them everywhere across the planet. They're pretty ubiquitous. If you can find rocks this old, bam, usually these BIFs are there. So
I guess we should get started real fast. You just want to do like a background information on like timeline. I'm not even just kind of going off script here, but I was just kind of thinking we've talked about Precambrian time. We just did an episode on Snowball Earth and stuff like that. And we're going back like way back in the beginning. Actually, this kind of ties in with the episode that we did on the origins of life.
Mm-hmm.
Like way back in the beginning, like before there was originally there wasn't any oxygen in the atmosphere, or there wasn't, there wasn't a prevalent oxygen in the Earth's atmosphere. And that's what these banded iron formations are recording. They're not made anymore. And in order to, well, there was actually a couple hypotheses on how these things formed, but the winning hypothesis that people are tending to stick to right now or go with is that they form in an environment where there's not much readily available oxygen. And there's actually a couple different variables at play here that are required really for to make these banded iron formations. And we're dealing with iron here. And when iron, just in general, when iron comes, I guess we should also talk about, now that I think about it, the two types of iron. There's ferrous is iron 2, ferric is iron 3.
Yes.
And okay, so what happens is ferrous iron comes in contact with oxygen, and it gets oxidized. It gets rusted, basically. So the ferrous is, you could say, it's the reduced state of iron, and the ferric is the oxidized or the you can say the oxidized state of iron.
Saying ferrous and ferric is good to identify their oxidation state, but whenever you say like ferrous iron or ferric iron, it's a little bit redundant since ferrum is the Latin word for iron.
Ooh.
So, yeah, you're right.
That's where,
Snap.
if you ever wondered where Fe on the periodic table comes from.
There you go. Nice.
So, but yeah, I mean, and oftentimes in, I think, industry, ferrous is a term that gets thrown around just for metals in general.
Yeah.
But there are deeper meanings to these things. So Fe2 is ferrous and Fe3 is ferric.
And so, okay, so we're talking about these banded iron formations, which is great. We have these banded iron, so it's layers, right? It's like alternating layers of red and black, and like these pretty, like, super bright colored layers. But like Chris mentioned, where did it come from? Right? There's iron coming from somewhere, and they're laying down in these precipitated layers. So honestly, this is all super old stuff that we've been talking about for the last few podcasts. So they're Precambrian. We're talking 20. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say exactly what you were gonna say.
Yeah, like 2.5 billion to 2.8 million years ago.
2.8 no.
No
2.8 million.
All of it's billion. Just stay in the billions.
It goes into
2.5 billion to 2.8 billion. Did I say million?
You said million there.
I'm stinker.
I
apologize. That would be weird.
Towards Pleistocene.
That would be weird. Yes. All right.
It's been non-stop, just iron just dropping.
Dropping like it's hot. No. So yes, 2.5 billion to 2.8 billion, with secondary peaks deposition in the like around like 1.8, and then I guess the minor amounts were deposited about 750 million years ago. So this stuff is old. So basically our planet was there. We were hot molten rock. We cooled down. We had some water. It was iron rich water. And then until we started having essentially photosynthesis or something to produce oxygen in the atmosphere, then you had all this iron rich water that started to rust.
So
I mean, that's the basic background. Yeah.
You had this iron rich water, but it was dissolved in the water.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So
So you're
so the
you're
ferrous,
talking like a salty water, but instead of the salt, imagine it being iron.
So you have to understand. So before oxygen, it was all ferrous iron. Ferrous, we'll just say that. I'm sorry, I'm so used to say.
That's
So it was all ferrous before, and you needed some source of oxygen. And so that's the really important things is with the banded iron formations is they started forming when we see that pulse of oxygen coming in. And so it's like, well, where is this where's this stuff coming from? And what like Steve said previously, it's from your like basically cyanobacteria kind of started off and just kind of like this like the simplest like first traces of life. And that starts taking that and starts oxidizing the ferrous into ferric. And when that happens, then it falls out, it precipitates, it falls out of solution. So one of the other things that I think we should mention is that these banded iron formations, it's been noted that there's two different types of them. They form in two different environments. So
I'm on the edge of my seat here because I don't know about this. This is news to me.
oh, you didn't know about the two different types?
I didn't. I did. Yeah.
So it all comes down to what's your source of iron, right? So the two types of BIFs, number one, there's the algama type, and those are related to volcanic arc settings. And basically the source of this iron is coming from submarine volcanism. And then there's also the superior type, or sometimes it's also known as the Lake Superior type. And this is found more on a continental shelf type environment. And there's no direct link to volcanism at all. The source of iron is from your weathered crust. So we need continents at this point, right? And we need, plate tectonics are turned on by this point. But one of the significant things with the superior type of BIFs is that we look at, there's a scarce amount of clay minerals, lithic fragments, detrital feldspar, and heavy minerals, also known as like your mafic minerals, basically. And so what that's telling us is that it's coming from areas with a lot with a lot of chemical weathering going on. That stuff it just all gets chemically weathered out. So there's no evidence of any of that stuff. But both of these the BIFs are similar. They both have thin layering ranging from less than a millimeter to several centimeters. Once again, that alternating like chert, iron oxide, chert, iron oxide layers. So one other fun thing about BIFs is that you can take BIFs from I guess they all kind of look the same, basically is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. What's interesting about the BIFs too is, maybe you've seen pictures of BIFs, maybe not, but if you're watching our video or listening to our podcast, look up a picture of a BIF, and it's usually like these bright red bands separated by like these black bands, but it's like bright red, like, oh yes, that looks like rusty iron. And it turns out the iron deposits that we mine for, basically almost all the iron on the planet, the iron doesn't come from the bright red, what you would think oxidized chert. That's the bright red chert. It's actually the dark black bands in between is where the most of the iron ore is, which is caught me by surprise, at least when I was doing research on the BIFs. I thought the red stuff would have been the iron rich stuff, but no, it turns out, yes, it does have iron in it, but it's actually the black stuff in between that's where you get your money, so to speak.
So the darker layers, the iron rich layers, they're usually the main minerals in them it's either hematite or magnetite. And without going into too much chemistry, because it's Friday, we both had long weeks, and I don't know if any of us want to handle chemistry right now, but basically from the research that I was looking up, the way that you get the magnetite forming is that the the iron oxide comes in contact with some carbon, and that carbon basically pulls out some, it turns into CO2, right? When it comes in contact, you get CO2 as a byproduct, and then you get magnetite forming as a result of that.
Huh.
So that's kind of, yeah, basically the difference between the magnetite and the hematite is that the magnetite just kind of came into contact with some carbon and then kind of changed it around a little bit. And the other point that I was trying to make about the BIFs before Steve so rudely interrupted me.
I'm the worst.
If you give an expert in BIFs, BIFs from, just a random BIF, they're not going to be able to tell you where it's from, because they all pretty much look the same. It's not like some rocks, like you look at it and you're like, oh, I could tell you exactly where this rock is from, or, something like that. With BIFs, it's tricky because they all pretty much are just, they all look uniform. There's really not much, there's a little bit of variation with the way they look, but they're pretty uniform across the globe. So I guess let's see, where should we go from here? We could talk about
we could talk about the cyclicity of it.
Yeah, that's yeah. So
the cyclicity of it. So think of the cyanobacteria basically eating up all the CO2 that's in the atmosphere. So it's then busting out all this oxygen, which then causes all the oceans to rust, which then you reach that equilibrium, then the oceans rust and they settle down. So you get this band of iron. Then the cyanobacteria has to start all over again and then start reproducing all this oxygen in the atmosphere, and then it gets the oxygen in the atmosphere gets to a point of saturation where the ocean starts to rust again. So in modern day times, we could think of this as like seasonality, where you have something what are called varves in lakes, where you have spring thaw, which then dumps a ton of sediment into your lakes because just glaciers or snow's melting, stuff is being poured into the lakes. And then you have the fall, where you have all this organic material, leaves and all this other stuff just dumping into your lakes. So you get all this organic material dumping on top. So in lakes, we get these things called varves, where you have these light bands of just sediment input in the spring, or then dark input from fall and winter, where you have all this organic material plotting in. So the banded part of the banded iron formations is believed to be oxygen reaches a critical mass, the oceans rust, it sucks all the oxygen out of the atmosphere, it happens again, and you get these bands of iron basically being deposited in the oceans from not quite similar, like not quite seasonality thing, but basically the oxygen saturation reaches a limit, then the oceans rust, and then you have to build that oxygen back up.
So the other thing I just want to point out, we're dealing with some really old life here, right? And the life that we're dealing with are they're prokaryotes, right? So a type of prokaryote that we all know of is cyanobacteria, right? So these things back in the day were very, very, very sensitive to oxygen. All right. Oxygen is they say like a very caustic element. It's a pretty nasty thing by itself, right? And the very like earliest of life, these prokaryotes, if they came in contact, they could handle like tiny little bits of oxygen. So they produce oxygen as a waste product. Okay. And what they did was, they were able to kind of kick that oxygen away from them, so that it wouldn't harm them or wouldn't kill them. But if they were if they were in an environment with lots of oxygen, they would die. Right. And that's kind of one of the things that we see that Steve was talking about with these cycles. They're kind of spitting the oxygen out. You put some oxygen into the oceans, it turns from ferric to ferrous, the types of iron that's inside the ocean. The ferric kind of precipitates down, it falls down when the oxygen levels get too high, and then that heightened oxygen levels that kind of stifles the prokaryotes, or the early
Yeah.
life.
Not to be too gross, but we ingest a lot of stuff and we expel a lot of stuff. Imagine if you had to sit in a room
Of carbon dioxide.
no, I wasn't going with carbon dioxide, but all the stuff we expel from our bodies, eventually it would become unhealthy and you would die. So
Yes, if you're sitting in a room of carbon dioxide,
or sitting in room of a septic system is more of what I was thinking. But yeah,
I mean, you just use up the oxygen.
yes. Anyway, so yeah, it that's where you get these critical masses, and then you break down, and then you get back to the critical mass.
And well, there were actually some thoughts about the BIFs being related to seasonality as well, because these prokaryotes did use the iron. That was a nutrient that they used in their metabolism, and it was thought that there could be some type of like seasonality of upwelling of iron from, like, if you had these the submarine volcanics, or the smokers, stuff like that, that's spewing out a ton of iron, and then there's some upwelling that's linked to some type of seasonality, that comes up, and you get this dump of ferrous into the oceans, and that spurs the growth of these, of the primitive life, and then boom, and they start kicking off oxygen, and then there you go.
And that makes a lot. We see, cyclicity with upwelling today,
Mm-hmm.
either seasonal, or you look at something like El Nino, where you have the layer of the oceans, or the main sort of circulation of the ocean every couple of years gets affected.
And then also we see it with dust storms coming off of the Saharan desert in the Atlantic Ocean. So the one thing in some of these areas, just the one variable that's missing for like a huge algal bloom is just iron. And so the dust storm, this actually goes back to a book that Jesse's reading about dust or something like that. He was showing us earlier. What was that book called?
The Secret Life of Dust.
The Secret Life of Dust. There you go. So you get these dust storms from the Saharan desert coming over, and it just dumps all that stuff into the Atlantic Ocean. You add iron into the ocean, boom, you get a big algal bloom.
Well, hang on, Chris. You're going off of the outline.
I was never following the outline to begin with.
Well, if you were following our perfectly organized word outline, you would know that our Patreon and our ultimate sponsor, honestly, Formatting Formula, would smack you on the wrist right now. Did you go to Catholic school, Chris?
I did.
Yeah. See, all right. I'm gonna find one of the nuns who taught you at Catholic school and just have her slap you across the wrist now
with a roller.
So yes, formattingformula.com or YouTube/C/formatting formula is our wonderful sponsor for all of your Word documenting needs, to anything from, I don't know, table of contents to embedding figures to they can actually personalize the header toolbar. Like, you can change that stuff. I didn't even know you could change that stuff. All that stuff. Formattingformula.com. They will help you out. They're excellent. But if you want to hire them to do your stuff, absolutely, they can do it, and they can do it fast and efficiently and awesome. But you can also go to YouTube/C/formatting formula. Check out their videos. They can actually teach you how to do the stuff yourself. So But even more importantly than that, make sure you tell them the Geology Flannelcast sent you, because let's face it, they literally keep the lights on. So thank you, Formatting Formula. If you have any questions, please send them to us or send them to the Formatting Formula. We will help you out as best we can. Thank you.
So back to dust.
Oh, we're all just dust in the wind, Kansas. Let's do it.
There's some kind of going off topic, but it's a fun topic related to dust and iron. So it's still on the on the agenda here. In terms of like kind of halting climate change, right? Especially like the warming climate. There's been some thought experiments about maybe all we need to do is to dump some iron into the Atlantic in some of these areas where you get these giant algal blooms to release oxygen, because we all know the climate is, to really simplify this, really water this down, it's this relationship between carbon dioxide and oxygen. So when you get more oxygen in the atmosphere, temperatures tend to get colder. When you get more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, temperatures tend to get warmer. So if we could take this iron, and you just need iron pellets, really. It's just, there's nothing crazy about this. And you dump this iron into the ocean and basically purposely cause these giant algal blooms. It'll dump out, basically spit out oxygen. Maybe it'll cool down the globe. So it's been a little thought experiment, but they've been, number one, it would be expensive to do this, but all you have to do is to literally get just like tankers of just iron, boom, dump the iron into the ocean, boom, spur an algal bloom, and you get oxygen into the atmosphere. But I think the one fear is, what if you accidentally set off an ice age?
Well, that's a fear I carry daily with every action I take.
The day after tomorrow taught me anything.
So just general, that's the idea of photosynthesis, where you draw down CO2. Photosynthetic organisms are using CO2 and water and the energy from the sun, and they're converting it into sugar, C6H12O6 and oxygen. Yeah. I know my generic formula for sugar. And so, if we fertilize the oceans, this idea of this is sort of like low scale geoengineering. Aside from ice ages, on a smaller scale, it would cause an algal bloom, and algal blooms in general are really bad for ecosystems where they
they like kill everything.
Because they while they do produce oxygen, algae overturns really quickly. Like it grows really quickly, but it dies really quickly. And so when it dies, then bacteria breaks it down. And so algal blooms use a lot of oxygen that's in the water and actually cause anoxic conditions. And they can also poison any fish that or any aquatic organisms. They are also, it's usually when you have an algal bloom, it's bad. That's why if you look at, say, like your detergent for your laundry detergent, you'll often see that it says that it's phosphate free or free of phosphorus. And that's because phosphorus is one of the limiting nutrients that oftentimes these algae look for. And so if it gets into waterways, it can cause algal blooms. And so we've taken it out of detergents to prevent this. And, it's a big problem around agriculture too, because fertilizers have a lot of nitrates and a lot of phosphates, which algae just loves, causing the bloom, and they're bad news. So while it would be good for cooling off the planet, it's probably bad for the ecosystem in general. Also, ice ages.
Yeah, ice ages.
Well, and there would be an irony. That's a good use of iron.
Oh, nice pun.
if we recreated some of this fertilization with iron, these iron filings, so we're using BIFs and we create a snowball Earth. We go in reverse. Where BIFs came at the end of the last snowball Earth.
Let's do it.
Huh? I just want to give a real quick shout out. When we talked about Snowball Earth last week, Patreon and fan of the show, Vince really loved our pun. I think it was yours, Steve. Gondwana in 60 seconds.
That was yours, Jesse.
I
Was
think
it?
it was yours.
That was
Yeah.
yours.
No wonder I thought it was so hilarious. But he said we really missed an opportunity when we had BIFs at the end of the Snowball Earth. We could have said back in business.
That's terrible. No. But honestly,
All right, edit that out.
if we're giving shout outs right now, I'd like to give a shout out to our Patreon, Michelle, who basically called us out on BIFs. Like, well, how did they form?
Yeah.
How is this happening? And we were like, we will get to that. And here we are getting to it. So
we all hung up on the call. We all ran away.
Not quite that hardcore, but close. Just to get to, the basics that we've been kind of talking about, skirting around. So yes, there's iron in the ocean. There's iron basically everywhere. Our planet's cooling off from its formation. Then
Iron's the fourth most abundant element on Earth's crust.
So then we get this cyanobacteria basically burping oxygen. It gets to a point where, all right, well, we all know what happens when oxygen hits iron. It rusts. Blam. Drops it out in solution. We get these gigantic banded iron formations.
So the one thing, though, I think that's really cool is that when the iron falls out, and just imagine this stuff collecting at the bottom of the ocean floor, it's like a gel or an ooze, right? Yeah, it's not just like little like, granules of iron. It's a gel, and it doesn't actually turn into a solid until diagenesis.
Huh.
So you have alternating layers, and like you said, it's basically the most simplest way to explain this. You have your iron rich layer, and then you have your cherty layer, right? Well, how does chert form? Chert is a silicious ooze, right? It's the first thing you always learn about that. So it's an iron ooze, silicious ooze, iron. It's just a pile of ooze where, depending on where you go, sometimes they'll say the word gel, but it's all just different layers of ooze, and it turns into a solid during the process of diagenesis.
Oh, that'd be so weird because it's probably dense. I mean, it is dense. It's iron.
Yeah.
So imagine holding this dense gel or ooze in your hand. That'd be really weird.
We did a podcast on the first stint, like years and years and years ago, about some. I vaguely remember the story, but someone in a submersible somewhere actually filmed. They found like these like lenses of silicious ooze where that would eventually become chert.
Huh.
And we did it like it was like way back in the beginning, but we were talking about a news story where they actually saw these like basically puddles of silicious ooze at the bottom of the ocean floor.
That's crazy.
That's where chert comes from.
And you do you see like the bottom of the ocean today is ooze, and it's a lot of organic material, and the organic material is really interesting. Comes from all of these single cellular, planktonic organisms that are alive today, that when they die, they just sink to the bottom and they sort of pile up, because in really deep water, you have very low oxygen. So there's not much bacteria to break it down. It's pretty anoxic. And so it piles up, and so you get all this carbonaceous ooze that's down there. There's all this organic material. So the bottom of the ocean, and the majority of the ocean is sort of just mud. It's this muddy ooze. And if you're above, a certain depth, it'll be, you'll have carbonates that form. So if you're above the
carbonate compensation depth,
the CCD, You'll have that. But yeah, the bottom of the ocean today is this. But can you imagine iron ooze? I'm trying to find a picture of silicious ooze. That'd be really weird to see these lenses of silicious ooze.
So
Oh,
thought experiment question. All right.
I love it.
All right. So we were talking about, I want to go back to this seeding the iron seeding the ocean, right? If you get an algal bloom, right? If you form an algal bloom, right? But then all of that organic material, when it dies, just falls down to the deepest part of the ocean where it's already anoxic, doesn't really decompose. Is that really going to alter anything? Is that going to cause that negative feedback loop that sucks out the oxygen? If it just kind of falls down to the anoxic zone?
Yeah, because it won't break down.
It won't break down. So as long as that stuff doesn't decompose, then
You have a net draw.
It's not going to suck the oxygen out. Because the decomposition of that organic material.
Yeah, I guess in the deep
oxygen.
ocean. Yeah, that's.
And I think I gotta
algal,
revisit the study, but I think that was.
I think you're right, because algal blooms are bad, but mainly in freshwater and surface water. Yeah,
like the Chesapeake Bay. That's not freshwater. So that's shallow. Yeah,
shallow. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. All right. Well, let's see if we can buy a ship and buy some iron.
So then I guess like the big fear is setting off an ice age then.
Well, if we stockpile enough Dogecoin, we can buy a ship.
I like it. I like it.
We'll stock the ship with provisions to weather out the ice. It will be like one of those old timey explorers like Shackleton or something. We'll get iced in and we'll just see where the ice takes us.
There you go.
That's my plan at least.
So all right, fun fact about BIFs that's not in the outline. I'm going to try to knock you guys' socks off right now. There is a hypothesis out there. It's not the accepted one right now, but it's just kind of this was back in 1976 by Dimroth and Kimberly. And they didn't think that BIFs formed in an anoxic environment. They, in their study, said that they felt that they found evidence that the Precambrian atmosphere as far back as 3.75 billion years ago contained abundant oxygen. Abundant is what they said. Yeah. But then, it's always good. They in the textbook, when you're reading this, in the next paragraph, the author starts to like say, but
big but here. Might be a reason we haven't heard about this since 1976.
That might be a reason. Yeah, it didn't catch on, but
how do you form it?
It got into, they started talking about the I don't know off the top of my head.
Well, that's interesting regardless. Huh. Yeah.
They got into the fugacity of oxygen, the partial pressure of oxygen. I'll just leave it at that.
We all know that.
They started.
So moving on.
If you're not into the fugacity of oxygen.
Yeah, as you all know. Anyway, that's interesting. I wish they would have tried to tie together like 3 different crazy theories.
No, it seemed like it, but basically the thing is the main argument with that, with their, with these guys supporting the fact that these BIFs formed in an oxygen-rich environment. The one argument was that the data they looked at wasn't like on a global scale. It was it just didn't have a big enough data set, basically, for it to be like, oh yeah. So it's just a fun thing right there. I don't think that BIFs formed in an oxygen-rich environment, but it was just like I said, this is a reference from 1976 too, so it's really old.
All right, so to wrap up our BIFs.
The one thing I wanted to say too. Here we go.
Oh my gosh, Chris, carry on.
We need. I don't think that we, really set this point. We really emphasize this point enough. to get BIFs forming, it starts off with a low oxygen environment, right? We're essentially, you can view these rocks. We have a window from like 2.5 billion years ago to basically the end of Precambrian time, basically is when the BIFs were being deposited. So it's kind of the Earth coming to this equilibrium with oxygen, right? It's like this battle, right? So you get a pulse of oxygen, but the whole thing is you go from, it's the Earth reacting from going from like basically no oxygen or very, very, I shouldn't say no oxygen, but very, very little oxygen to boom, we get a pulse of oxygen. The Earth is like, yo, I'm all out of whack right now. You know, the iron starts falling out of the ocean, starts precipitating out of the ocean, and this ooze all over the place. You know,
What is going on?
What's going on?
Exactly. You hit
It's
that
like,
tipping point where it's like, nope, that's it.
the
I'm
Earth
going
is
from liquid to solid. I'm out.
the Earth is going through growing pains. You know,
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Yeah, what's happening?
and it's going back and forth. You're getting these small pulses of oxygen, and when these prokaryotes are, and there's other organisms too. We're just the one that most people know of is like the cyanobacteria. You know, you say like stromatolites and stuff like that, but there's also other organisms that will oxidize iron without releasing oxygen as well. So you get these organisms start growing. And yeah, it all they metabolically they use the iron.
Oh, that makes okay.
But you end up getting these pulses of, you know, releasing oxygen and absorbing the iron and stuff like that. And it's just back and forth until one thing that we left out: the BIFs stop when organisms evolve to be able to hang with oxygen. Remember, oxygen's super corrosive. It's super corrosive.
I mean, that's what kills you. You're slowly oxidizing.
Yes.
That's a good point.
Yeah. And that's how things burn. It's an oxidation process. So you're slowly burning as you die.
Yeah. The fire tetrahedron.
Yeah.
So what ends up happening is evolution just needs one more step, and then boom, life is finally able to hang in the presence of oxygen. Now that's the game changer right there, because now it doesn't matter what your oxygen levels are. These organisms are using photosynthesis, and they're just just spitting out all this oxygen, and the oxygen eventually it overcomes. You get a ton of oxygen in the ocean, and then it starts spilling out into the atmosphere. And then
so what you're saying is life finds a way.
Life finds a way.
Thank you, Jeff Goldblum. Yes.
That's really interesting. I never thought about like why the BIF stopped. In my mind, I was just always like, oh, it just built up enough oxygen in the atmosphere that any soluble iron just sort of precipitated out. But that sort of makes sense, that you have these rhythmic layers where you're building up oxygen, things are falling out, and then you're building up and things are falling out, and so on and so forth, getting these sort of that's why you're getting
like things.
The banding. That makes a lot of sense. You make a little too much sense, quite frankly.
That's what I'm here for. So you get to the point then, and it's just these organisms just start producing oxygen in mass, and then boom, then you get all of this oxygen into the atmosphere, and then are we on a crazy ride from there?
Yeah. So honestly, 60% of the world's iron, 60%, more than half, comes from these banded iron formations.
It's a lot.
Which is insane. To think about, like you're talking about over 1 billion-year-old rocks is where we get all of our iron. And you know, I live in Pennsylvania, and I've worked in a town called Steelton. Like that's where the steel industry kind of began in Pennsylvania. Like to think about Bethlehem Steel and all these different steel industries, like all of this is based mostly on Precambrian rock. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Want to know another fun fact about iron?
Yes.
All right, here we go. Let's talk about the Amazon River, right?
All right.
You guys know how much iron's coming out of the Amazon River right now? It's like crazy how much iron's in the Amazon River.
I would have said a little, but you're leading me with your tone to believe it's a lot.
What does 3 parts per million mean to you?
3 ppm.
Yes, 3 ppm. You think that's a lot of iron?
That no.
Okay. So, listen, you calm down there, Peterson, all right?
It does not mean a lot. No, that's probably background.
All right. So the Amazon River, which has an iron content about 3 parts per million, in 176,000 years will dump enough iron, ferric iron, to form the Billibic iron formation that's in Minnesota. They mine the BIF.
Yes.
The big BIF formation. Basically, okay. So what I just said there is in
So
176,000 years, the Amazon River dumps enough iron out to form the big BIF formation in Minnesota. That's it.
I believe that.
176,000 years.
That's crazy. That's a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, so you also bring up a good point in that, like, these BIFs, you find them everywhere and they sort of look the same from the same time period, but there's not many rocks from that time period left. And so like the Great Lakes region, especially in Michigan and Minnesota, are where we find the major BIF deposits that essentially we use for our as ore for the steel industry. So that's kind of crazy here in the US and North America. And then, we ship most of that overseas. I had a number here and I'm trying to figure out the Great Lakes region. So, I mean, up in Michigan, they call that the Iron Range. Shoot, I had a number and I just totally lost it on how much that provides.
It's in one of your tabs.
It's in one of, I have so many tabs. Oh, here it is. In 2016, Minnesota, in the BIF deposit you're talking about, accounted for 75% of all of US production.
Ooh, that's a lot.
Yeah. And so you're saying we could just be getting that out of the Amazon. So it's interesting, if I could tie it to industrial processes, which I love to do. BIFs form as a function of oxidation, right? So that forms the iron. And to actually get steel or get sort of pure steel, you need the Bessemer process.
Tell me about the Bessemer process.
Well, it's where you take iron ore and you have molten iron ore, and you basically use a blast furnace, which is where you oxidize it. So you're pumping in oxygen to
good old Frank Bessemer.
Yeah, to essentially drive off any impurities like carbon and other things. So you take, that impure iron is what we call pig iron, which I don't know the why it's called pig iron here, but
I'm sure there's a good story.
You don't need
somewhere.
to know. Carry on.
Yeah, it was actually Henry Bessemer as well. Just
I thought it was Frank. Damn. Anyway,
maybe he went by Frank.
Nope. Henry Bessemer.
So I think we're pretty much getting to the end of all we can really talk about with BIFs here.
But
the simple
basically,
stuff,
this process of life, and it's incredible how cyclical these things are. So this process of life, of creating oxygen, these cyanobacteria, basically, all right, well, we got this to deal with. We're gonna take this CO2, we're gonna break it down, we're gonna pump out O2, which, whatever, and then bam, rust the ocean to the point where all this iron starts coming out of the ocean. Then billions of years later, here we are on the planet being like, oh, look at this. We have all this iron straight up for us to mine and use and create the Industrial Revolution. And, you know, honestly, before that, the Bronze Age, like all these things, like it's incredible how the planet evolves like this to get us to where we are now. It's crazy.
Couldn't have said it better myself, Mr. B.
Yeah. Always exciting. What was that first quote you had?
Oh,
Always interesting.
Always.
mostly
Always.
beautiful. Always. Oh, the bell of the cryptozoic rocks. Beautiful much of the time and interesting all the time.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That pretty much goes for the Flannelcast.
Another couple of little, yes, sure. Couple little fun facts here. This is nuts. 71% of all the BIFs that were, have like greater than 30% iron, like the real heavy hitter, iron deposits here. 71% of all the BIFs formed 2.5 to 2.2 billion years ago. So within a 300 million year range, you get 71% of all the BIFs being formed. And that accounts for 4 times 10 to the 14th tons. Wow. That's a big number.
Yeah. It's a lot of iron.
4 with 14 zeros, tons. Yeah. So there you have it. Anything else about BIFs?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting with BIFs. One thing we didn't really get into is there's some thought that there was this early-ish snowball-like event associated with the BIFs, because if you have during the Great Oxidation Event, where you evolve life to produce oxygen, you're pulling all this CO2 down. That's going to cool off the planet. But the problem is it's 2.5 billion years ago. Our evidence is so very limited.
Yeah.
You can't really say one way or the other.
Nope. I looked at my calendar 2.5 billion years ago. I was good.
You weren't breaking out the parka?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
Nope. It was spring like weather.
Question for you guys.
Uh-oh.
Did you guys hear about so I know about like the youngest BIFs kind of even go into like Cambrian time a little bit. Basically, it's for all intents and purposes, like the BIFs end, or the vast majority of the BIFs, you're at like 90 some odd percent of the BIFs, no more than that, had already formed 2 billion years ago. And then it just kind of cuts off. And like Steve said in the beginning of the podcast, around 700 million years ago to the end of Precambrian time, you get a little pulse of BIFs with the snowball Earth stuff going on. About 2%. Snowball Earth formed about 2% of all the BIFs that the big iron deposits greater than 30%. But then this table that I'm looking at in this textbook says that 0.2% of all the BIFs formed 370 million years ago.
Huh.
That was news to me, seeing that table. I'm trying to think. I mean, it's a relatively small amount, but
I mean, so that's the end. What is that? End Devonian, and that there's an extinction event there. The FF, the Franzian Fremenian.
Yeah. Oh, dude, beach right crack.
Yeah. Was that? I want to say that's an ice age. I'm almost positive that's an ice age.
Yeah, I think so.
So that I wonder.
A couple little BIFs forming from that thing.
Yeah, little mini BIFs, BIF Juniors.
I mean, we're only looking at what do we got here? 10 to the 12th tons. So still, it's a lot of tons.
That was a couple of Amazon rivers.
I can't do that math.
Do the math there. Ah,
Anyways, BIFs. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. We covered it.
We talked about it. Let's at least put it that way.
yeah, we touched on it.
Yeah. So banded iron formations, we can definitely get more in depth as you'd like. Please send us an email at the geologyflannelcast.com. We're trying to get better at Instagram. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter.
There was an
so-
attempt.
No, we're just a bunch of old dudes trying to get with this new technology.
Steve
So
was just talking about how he couldn't figure out how to even open up Instagram on his computer.
no,
Were you
listen,
using your
yes.
computer? Are you one of those people that use your computer to look at Instagram?
I tried and it was like, nope, you can't do this, old man. Yeah. So I'm getting there. Anyway, thanks for calling me out on that, Chris. If you have questions, please send us to geologyflannelcast.com. If you have comments, again, geologyflannelcast.com. Please tell your friends. We're on Facebook, Instagram. I don't know. Checking us out on apparently we have a LinkedIn check-in. So YouTube, of course, YouTube. And if you want some sweet merch, check out our website. You can get some stickers, some t-shirts, I don't know,
Coffee
some
mugs
mugs,
that
maybe
make
some
your-
onesies. I don't know, something.
I don't know if we have onesies. Don't say that.
Well, we should have onesies.
Now,
Think
now
of
that
all
we
those
said it, we gotta
babies
make
who
'em.
could be growing up as Flannelcasters.
I can't confirm nor deny anything that Steve said, but we definitely got coffee mugs. And if you
We
want to,
have coffee mugs.
if you'd like a Geology Flannelcast coffee mug, number one, you'll be the coolest person at your office, and number two, your coffee will taste approximately 20% better. give or
That is true. It is
plus or
about
minus
20%.
So, so we have that there. That
Yeah,
helps
we
out the
do have an
podcast.
error range.
And also, did you say Patreon?
Yeah,
Yeah, I got-
patreon.com, man. Check us out.
Geology
You can
Flannelcast.
hang out with us beforehand. Our Patreons who are listening now can attest that it's I'm not gonna lie, it's probably the greatest time of their lives.
There,
So-
Yeah, I was gonna undersell it a bit and say it was life changing, but yeah.
Yeah.
Patreons right now, our Patreon friends are helping us plan the episode 100 coming up in this is episode 93, so we got
Yeah.
episode 100 coming up soon. So
Yeah. Jesse says life changing. I said, the greatest part of their lives, but it's somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
We're pretty close. So anyway, thank you very much to our Patreons. Honestly, we could not do this without you. Thank you again to the formattingformula.com. We could not do this without you. And tell a friend. Tell your mom May. How's that?
how about this? They
Oh,
don't even have
yes.
to. They don't even have to be your friend.
No, that's true.
Tell
But
somebody.
by the time we post this, it'll be Mother's Day. So happy Mother's Day to all your mothers out there.
There you go. I'll probably get this out. I will get this out before Mother's Day.
So
Happy Mother's Day.
awesomely outrageous.
All right. Thank you, everyone, and have a great week. We'll see you guys next week.
Woo!
Yeah, Preston Cloud. Bye. Thanks for stopping.
I already
Bye.
stopped it. Come on.